I feel like you always forget where the cameras end up in
I
the
have to
actual
remember.
edit.
I have to remember in relation to the microphone. Okay,
Yeah.
the microphone is inverted, so I got to go this way and then this way.
Calm and banana.
What? I think you're going to discipline me. Calm.
It's the power of editing.
He just points wherever he wants.
I can
And
go
then moves the camera there.
You just did.
From now on, Calm is over there. Banana's over here.
But who's over here?
2 on top, 1 on bottom. All right.
Remember when we used to talk about video games?
Fuck are they?
Before we begin, the Gamers Advocate would like to remind you that any episode could contain game spoilers, so watch or listen with discretion. And now your hosts, AM Comnenos, Banana, and Legion. Enjoy the show.
All right. Welcome on
Stop
in
podcast.
to yet welcome on in to yet another episode of the Gamers Advocate podcast. I'm joined with AM Comnenos and Banana Hammock Republic and myself, Legion. Today we're going to be going over some gamified environments. There's clearly environments that are like sci-fi related that can just be pretty much made up. I Metroid is one that was always near and dear to me because I always loved that environment. I love the music, and in so doing, the lore later on, when I found out, I was like, this isn't the pirate area I thought it was when I was a kid. This was that home world that was ousted by pirates later on, and there's this whole lore thing going on, but everything made sense then. It was like, oh, that's why these elevators are the way they are. This is why the environment looks the way it does. That's why there's these statues that are these bird looking things, and none of that made sense to me at the time, even though I read the manual that came with like a little story and stuff, but it didn't really explain everything fully. Like I said, it wasn't until much later, and it was impressive that they kind of stuck to that imagery instead of just kind of making it up as they went, because to me it wouldn't have made sense if I was just coming up with that design on my own. But you had brought up one while we were discussing Banana, like things like Sonic. I was thinking like Crash Bandicoot, where you have these environments where somebody's clearly running through, and it's designed specifically so that the level design is integrated with what you're doing, so that way you can get good at that type of gameplay. But anyway, yeah, that's what we're kind of talking about, just the not necessarily level design, but gamified environments and how they integrate the storytelling and mechanics of the game into their narrative or gameplay experience.
Yeah, I think you'll see it in a lot of games where there is some aspect of platforming. And I think of games like, The Legend of Zelda, when it got to like the 3D games, there was a puzzle solving aspect. The games like God of War and Tomb Raider have a puzzle solving aspect. And everything is structured so that there's kind of a clear communication of what you're capable of interacting with, and maybe like, oh, that distance between these two platforms is about the distance I can jump. And one of those platforms needs to be lowered so I can actually make that jump. That is a very weird thing when you think of like the way real world navigation works. Like, rarely do I ever have to jump anywhere in my day-to-day routine. I just walk there. But in these video game environments, they have to build things in a way that like keeps you engaged while you're just kind of navigating the world. And it's something I think we've all just kind of grown to accept. And I'm not saying we should reject it, but it's something that, like, I think if you think about, there's this huge disconnect between the narrative world and the gameplay world. And we are all just on board with that for the experience that the gameplay world provides.
There's one that gets me every now and again, which was a few days ago. I was just walking through town, and I happened to see a friend a little ways away. I hadn't seen them for quite a long time. And I saw this person in the distance. There wasn't planned, nothing like that. And there was a moment of, oh, it's them. And I was really excited to go and see them. So I sort of broke into a little jog. And then I got all the way to them. I thought, oh, I'm tired now. I only went about 30 meters, 100 feet, but already I was like, oh, I never run anywhere. And there's just that moment of, okay, breathe again, breathe. My video game character is jogging all day. My video game character jogs to relax. My video game character jogs to get their stamina back, whereas you as a human, it's very much not the case. You jog and then I need my stamina back. I'm going to walk, I'm going to sit down. We spend pretty much all of our lives sitting, lying down, or walking. Everything that our video game character does, basically, the jogging, the sprinting, the leaping, we don't do it. And we would imagine that the thing that our video game character does all the time that we don't do is fighting. We would imagine, we don't fight. We don't go out and engage in gun battles. We don't go out and jump over obstacles and do platforming. We don't do the most basic thing that character does. We don't even move around in the same way. And that's a weird disconnect I've often had in games sometimes is, oftentimes in an RPG or something similar, if I've got like a good camera and the world looks great, it's nice when you first arrive in a city to walk somewhere. I really enjoyed doing it in The Witcher 3, and it was trying to learn a little bit about the navigation of the city, because I can't remember the name of the city, but the big one. I was really, really enjoying just walking around and seeing like, oh,
city.
Can I get recap? Can I get from the bookstore to the docks? In the end, I think that's like quite a straight line. That's fairly easy. Can I get from the docks up to the higher district? And can I do it by memory? Can I do it by looking at the world around me because it's so well developed? And the only way that I was able to do that really was by walking. Because when I was running through, I would just look at the mini-map, bada bim, job done. But walking allowed me to interact with the world in a way that was much more vivid than running ever was. But simultaneously, a friend was over and we were playing some video games together, and you were kind of just doing like, I'll play 10 minutes, you play 10 minutes. It's The Witcher, you can't really play co-op. And you don't want to wait for a death because that can be hours. He never walked. And the minute that I was walking, sometimes he would just go like, oh, can you start running, please? Can you go and do something? And it was deemed to be this incredibly boring activity, despite the fact that we do it all the time.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah, that actually highlights another thing that's like that very big disconnect. Is as you were discussing that, I was thinking about like all those games that I've played recently where you're playing as a main character who's navigating a world filled with other characters. So like Final Fantasy X, like Dragon Age Veilguard, all of these games where like you have to travel somewhere and you're walking there. My character is always running at like a dead sprint through a town full of people who are just going about their lives. And nobody ever seems to be alarmed by the fact that I am just like all out sprinting because I have shit to do. And it makes me think of those games like Assassin's Creed and Grand Theft Auto, where you're supposed to like at times blend in with the crowd, and nobody is ever like, I think it's the dude who's sprinting. Like, it's just, you are such an outlier in the world if you are running at a full sprint all the time. You are so suspicious, so conspicuous that like that is something we only accept from video games. Because if somebody started like a movie like that and the main character was just like, I have viewers, I can't wait to walk somewhere, I have to sprint there, we'd be like, this movie is terrible. But because it's in a video game, we're like, yeah, I have shit to do.
I think
let's move along.
And like you said, if that was in real life and you're just sitting on the square somewhere and someone comes sprinting through, it's the human equivalent of like an abandoned piece of luggage at a train station. Everyone is now thinking like, shit, what the hell's going on? Something's up. This is wrong.
He's either running from something or to something, and I need to know which direction I need to run now.
Now all of a sudden there's a stampede. Why isn't this happening in Final Fantasy X on the Mihen High Road?
Casual running ain't a thing for most areas.
Yeah. I will see people jog in the area around me, and I'm like, all right, they're doing that for, fitness. But if they're jogging wearing clothes that don't suit fitness, I'm just like, you're in trouble, aren't you?
Is he jogging with a briefcase?
Yeah. Or you're late. That's another pretty understandable one.
Very rarely turns into a jog, though. It turns into the awkward walk for a few steps, jog for a few steps, make it look around, make sure no one looked and saw you, do it again.
Yeah.
You got the awkward mid-jog, if you're late.
Jogging to realize just how out of shape you are, and then power walking.
Yeah. I think in Diablo, specifically Diablo 2, a lot of times people get real frustrated with the very beginning of it because your stamina is super low and you can't run for very long at all. You go for a little bit and then you have to stop. So the early pacing of that game is somewhat slowed because your stamina is not very high. Fortunately, there's enemies everywhere, so you don't have to run from one place to another. But as you level up and as you need to get from one area to another, that stamina has built up just naturally, and so the game seems to move along. The pacing in Diablo 2 is just phenomenally made. But a lot of times people do complain about the inability to run right away in Diablo 2. It's a lot of people note that. Can appreciate where Com is coming from when it comes to The Witcher, because I think The Witcher is so unique in how it's made, in that it's an open world, but it didn't do the things like Bethesda does, where you can go in every single house if you wanted to. You might get caught as a burglar. But there may not be anything in there to do necessarily. They just,
you can go into houses without stealing things, right, Legion?
but just the act of going in, the act of going in is actually a criminal offense. So that's what's the difference, is that The Witcher was like,
I think they usually give you a warning. From what I remember of Skyrim, they're like, you're not supposed to be here. Yeah. And then that's your sign that you are currently trespassing, but you're not, they haven't called the guards yet. There's no like fine you need to pay.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, like I said, what Bethesda's doing there is that the cities are smaller, but it seems bigger because you can interact with so much more. Whereas in The Witcher, the town is so much larger and there's so much more to explore, because there's some areas you can go in, some areas you can't. And I think for me, I kind of appreciate what Com was saying, because where are those areas? You don't know them right away. Some of them are pretty unique. I remember there was a bank that's it's the dwarven bank where you kind of exchange your currency. I was like, I have to exchange currency in this game. Oh my goodness. But it was a little sunken. It was not like right at street level. It was a little bit below. I had to kind of like see that. And it kind of changed my narrative perspective. So the game design for that world was awfully well done. Because it really felt fleshed out and thought about for its storytelling.
Everybody who's playing a video game is trying to accomplish something. They're not living in that world. So like, we're typically focused very much on that one goal, and we're not thinking like, we don't have fatigue, we don't have that like exhaustion that comes from just running around all day in the real world. So we're always moving at that high speed and trying to get to our goal. But I'm thinking of those things that like in a video game where they try to almost recreate a familiar setting, and then they have to gamify it in some way so that you're navigating a familiar setting, but it's not boring. It's not so familiar that you're like, oh, I hate this. And one of the things I was coming up with is the Shinra building in Final Fantasy VII, because I've worked in an office for decades at this point, and it's not a fun environment. Like, I don't want to play a video game set in an office. That doesn't appeal to me. But you get into the Shinra Tower and you reach the 67th floor or whatever, that you have to find parts of the Shinra model and put them in the right slot to open another part and then unlock a door. And then you get to another floor and you have to crawl through vents to pick up items, and you only can unlock 3 doors. Like, that is a very gamified environment. Also, what are those floors doing in this building? Like, the floor with the model, there are no people there. It's like those rooms exist to hold parts of the model, which is stored in another room. Yeah. Why? Why does this floor exist?
And that, oddly enough, is something that I think is quite interesting when you see the development of video games, because you have that same area in the remake of Final Fantasy VII, but now they've had to adapt it to make it feel like it makes a bit more sense. Because when a game has the polygony characters and those little cutesy hand-painted backdrops, I think we accept more absurdity in there. Just of course this floor exists as a giant puzzle to unlock the elevator. Why wouldn't it? But if you're playing a 3D game, high-level graphics, people now have their high-quality voice acting, and everyone is just a bit more gristled. I'm not going to buy that. So they have to turn it into, actually, no, this was the museum that's found in the Shinra building. This is the tourist attraction. That's why there's the giant model of the city. So you have this strange trade-off between what we maybe accept in a simpler video game and what we accept in a more complicated video game as regards to what's acceptable when it comes to gamifying. And I think the other example that we were discussing, and it came up from Banana actually, just when we were having a chat about this beforehand, is Resident Evil. So when we're playing through the Resident Evil games, we typically have, if I remember correctly, the suit of cards keys. So we've got the spades key and the heart key and the club key and so on and so forth. What? For my house, I've got a key for the front door. I've got a key for the basement. I've got a key for my apartment door. And that's it. And weirdly enough, they're all different keys. These aren't the same key over and over again. Why have we decided that the second wing built a room on the left-hand side with the giant death plant in? Why have we decided that that has the same key as Dad's office on the first floor of the east wing? And why does that key also open the room to the giant snake? Why is this a thing? Aren't these all different keys? Why are these doors locked in the first place? Who came up with this? No coherent planner ever. But for a video game, it's interesting. Because now we can have that thought of, oh, my key didn't expire? That means somewhere else, I've got one more room to go into. I wonder what this is going to be.
And then there
That's
are
more interesting.
those other mechanisms for unlocking doors in Resident Evil. Like, oh, there's a pressure switch under these two hooks. I need something to weigh them down so this door will unlock. I have this destroyed weapon from using a lift previously. I'll put that in there, and suddenly the door unlocks. It was like, who designed this so that the exact weight of a broken shotgun was enough to open the door? Like, we just happened to have something that fit perfectly between these two hooks and weighed enough to open the door. Like, that's so convenient.
Think about when the mansion was being lived in, and just imagine Lisa Trevor as a kid, and maybe the mum of Lisa is at some point shouting, "Lisa, what the hell have you done with the other red jewel for the tiger's eye statue? I really need flour from the pantry."
Exactly.
I don't know who came up with it, but I'm so glad they did. But it's just none of this makes any sense in any coherent world.
You have a home invader, you grab a shotgun off that lever and a door locks somewhere, and you're like, fuck.
Weird enough, home invasion scenario, that tiger's eye statue is fantastic.
Yeah.
That actually makes sense.
The most paranoid home security system imaginable.
I mean, I've got a Ring camera in here pointing at the door, and I thought that was on edge. This is a different level entirely.
Yes. I need traps and puzzles to protect my $8 worth of stuff in this place.
Was Resident Evil inspired by Home Alone?
It seems that way.
So a lot of games like from Myst and Riven and things like that, they're integrating into a very unique environment. Very commonplace things. So that way you're like in this fantastical world that may not make sense to you, but you're using a book. I know what a book is, and I know what a ship is, and I know how water and ships work with each other. And so they use these really fantastic.
I can read.
Yeah, who knew?
Never learned to read. He just learned what loads of individual words meant,
and stringing them together in some kind of coherent understanding. Who knows? But yeah,
let's not go that far.
Yeah, but the puzzle games took that to an extreme because it's trying to like tell a story through the visual storytelling. So it was very important that you didn't find this like strange whatever it is and say, well, what is this for? And then you just don't know. And so it's really important for them to have had a common basis of how those things. So they used a maybe not so common gamified environment, but used common elements in order to tell their story.
That was the thing in Assassin's Creed where I think it was one of the first games they introduced you to like a free run route where it's like we've set up a bunch of environmental things that you can kind of chain together so that you can continue at a full sprint, and those will be marked by like a white cloth draped over something. So
right.
Like if you're running from the guards, look for those and you can use this to get away from them. It's very clearly like we're trying to highlight what you can actually do in a way that doesn't seem like a big arrow that's like, go here to run from the police, because that's a bit too heavy-handed. But at the same time, like, you're you're leaping from a bunch of conveniently placed bars and like swinging from potted plants that are hanging in just the perfect position for you to wrap around a corner at top speed. Like, this is not a realistic environment. Everything is too perfectly placed. So you're kind of balancing that realism with, convenience.
Well, it's a thing as well, actually, that I think we often overthink. So games with the yellow climbing pads or whatever it might be, Clair Obscur has this. By the way, Clair Obscur has stupid mini games. It's got these highlighted climbing things. But I forgot we like this game, so it doesn't matter because it's in this game. We only attack it when it's in games like Veilguard. I forgot about that. Things like this are fine. They're fine. They're absolutely fine. We need them. I think we've shown as gamers that we can't actually be trusted to find climbable walls if they're not marked in a game. It's just something, it's not our fault. It's because we're not necessarily looking for it on every single wall. It's like the invisible wall in Dark Souls. If you want to put some secret hidden things up on some cliff that we don't need for the story, wherever it might be, fine, don't show me where the climbable wall is, and I'm going to go around and test every wall to see if I can climb the damn thing. But if it's somewhere I've got to go, just tell me where to go. It's fine. And if you ever go climbing in real life, I don't want to spoil this for anyone, but you know where to go because there's trail markers. And as well as that, there's old pitons in place where people have put these in the rock so that you've got something to actually lash a rope onto. There's via ferrata, which are actually physical, like ladders hammered into the sides of mountains and cliff faces so that you can make your way across. This is a thing we do in real life, and we're just putting it into a game to make it more playable. There's a situation when I don't want this. If the game's about climbing, no. No, in that case, I want to decide where I'm going and how I'm going to do it, which is why I am perfectly happy with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I'm perfectly happy with Veilguard. I'm perfectly happy with Clair Obscur, indicating to me where can I climb, where can I not. On the other hand, I'm glad Spider-Man doesn't, because that game is going to be about me being able to decide, actually, I want to go and climb that one this time, or I want to go and jump over this one this time. And Assassin's Creed exists in a sort of weird in the middle place, because it's definitely not a game about climbing.
Yeah,
but it kind of is. It's a bit of an odd one.
I would say in the Assassin's Creed games, there's usually an indication of, like, you can look at a wall and see where handholds are and think like, oh, this is a wall I can climb. Especially in the early games, I remember there being points where, like, you would see handholds up to a point and then a gap. And it's like, oh, I can only climb that high, and then I have to move laterally or along the building. And they used to use that as a way to, like, kind of guide you through a specific path, and then you would end up kind of in a stealthy, advantageous position at the end of that path.
Yeah.
And I was totally fine with that playing through those games. I'm not sitting there looking at, like, St. Peter's Basilica and being like, why are there handholds for this specific route? Nobody designed this building like that. Like, I don't care. I'm enjoying the game.
With the yellow paint and the white paint and things like that, I think there's a change in ideology here. I've seen with the game development in saying we want you to have fun, but we don't want you to get stumbled along the way. But I'm seeing more and more games now starting to use it as an accessibility feature instead of like putting it as a part of the regular gameplay. Like, they're making it optional. So I know in the Tomb Raider games, you can just flat out turn it off and you just have to look for it. So, there is that, but that they went to like I heard a lot of complaining from a lot of gamers, like, well, I can't, the developers just think I'm too dumb to find this thing. Turn it off, find out. Bro,
statistics say that you are. Yeah. It's not you personally. It's players won't spot it. We won't find it. Yeah. In Clair Obscur, there was one area where I just didn't see it. I went in, thought, oh, this is disappointing, left. And then someone else mentioned the area to me later. And I was thinking, what do you mean it's good? It sucked. And then I found out I'd missed a thing. Yeah, it happens.
I think we have all done that at some point in a game where, like, it wasn't painfully obvious to us. And so we spent a half an hour just looking around in circles for what we were supposed to obviously detect in a few seconds. I definitely remember one time in Veilguard in Treviso, when you're introduced to the environment, there's an NPC, like not even somebody you can talk to, just somebody who's wandering around the village or the town or whatever, and they are standing in a position to prevent you from sidling across a ledge. And then I was just convinced, oh, that's not a ledge you can sidle across. That might just be like a little disconnect with the graphical presentation where like it's supposed to be a smooth wall and something's a little off. And then later that person moves out of the way and you can very easily sidle across that. And I'm looking at my mini map and there's a chest on the other side of that ledge and I'm like, but that's not a ledge you can walk across. Yes, it is. You just couldn't do it 10 minutes ago earlier in the game. You have to come back. I'm very much not like, I'm not going to say that one thing makes me a stupid gamer. I've done plenty of stupid things as a gamer. I think we all need to accept that we are going to have those moments where the environment tells us what we need to know and we're just oblivious somehow. It happens. And having those markers that tell you a little more obviously, like, hey, there's the possibility that you're going to choose to be stupid. I'm not calling you stupid, but you have the capacity to be stupid.
I'm going to give you my one, like in the interest just to show you, yeah, I'm not judging. In Papers, Please, which I was playing, you're handed a bomb in your security checkpoint, and you've got like 20 seconds to disarm this bomb, and there's 4 wires on the bomb. And I was streaming it, which didn't feel good. And I said, what do I do? What do I do? And so I was saying, cut the wires. I was, which one? What do I do? What do I do? So I cut one, whole thing explodes. And my chat was just full of like, he's an idiot. What's he doing? And then I went back in, and the wires are numbered in the order that you have to uncut. Yeah, and I didn't see the numbers. It didn't go in. And I hate to admit it now, but I actually saw the numbers on the 3rd try. I had another death in between. It just wasn't working, and the numbers aren't hidden. They're really visible.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned a interesting game, and it got me to thinking about how the storytelling is somehow missed with the environment and sometimes hits. And so when you said the invisible walls with Dark Souls, to me, I find that a big distraction, only because they're not consistent with how you discover them. So it's not like there's a draft or a different sound. Even the ones that you have to hit multiple times to get them to open, there's no difference there. So it's just one of those that you discover because somebody has probably already discovered. You're probably looking at a guide at this point. You may be just trying every single wall, but as I mentioned, there are some that require more than one tap. But also in The Witcher, especially The Witcher 2, your enemies that die, they leave loot. That may not be very good loot, especially at the very beginning. But you have to wait for them to actually disappear before you can pick it up. That's just as distracting. Your gameplay is interrupted because your need to find the loot or discover that hidden wall is impacting your ability just to play the game. So like I said, if there's some kind of like, you know, Dark Souls does that better because you actually kill the person and you get the loot automatically. You're not picking up anything. It's moving the pace. But then you stop your own because you're trying to discover the environment without actually getting to discover the environment.
Well, Dark Souls is a weird one, actually. Initially, I thought you meant invisible walls, as in the ones that like stop you going places.
I was gonna.
Are there?
I was gonna try to make that clarification.
Yeah,
the illusory walls in Dark Souls. Those are their own thing. Those invisible walls that are like, we didn't feel like building the game beyond this point. Just stop here. those definitely disconnect you from the real world as well. But
yeah,
they're less common, I think, now.
The illusory walls that you can't find by yourself unless you go and test every single wall, I like them because it's the community aspect of the game. You don't find them by yourself, and you don't find them by getting a guide. You find them because 500 people have stood on that spot, and they've all made a message pointing to that wall saying, secret here, invisible wall here. And I love
I don't need a message in front of that wall. I'm not stupid.
Idiots. And I love the fact that they can lie about it too. And I knew it was a lie. I didn't fall for it.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful feature of certain games in certain situations, which I think just works really well. If every single player game was like that, I'd probably hate it. But when it's well done, like in those, I think it's an amazing feature. It really makes the game feel bigger than what you're actually playing.
I've seen it done really well without needing any of that, and that's specifically Nier Automata. Nier Automata, its point is, I can't go into deep spoilers about that, but its point at the end of the day is how community helps each other. It's one of the many points it's trying to make, but at the very end of it, it's trying to say, look, only together can we succeed. But yet it's a very single-player game.
Yeah, in this single-player game.
It's a very single-player game.
I think that is just fundamentally a difference in the goal of the developers with Nier Automata and Dark Souls. Dark Souls was meant to be a community game. You can play it as a single player, and you'll get mostly the same experience. The boss fights will have the same mechanics. There will just be one fewer person participating in them if you play it solo. But the game was meant to be a multiplayer game with kind of limited multiplayer. It's not, co-op the entire time. It's not PvP the entire time. It's kind of compartmentalized into discrete environments where those things will happen. But Nier Automata was meant to be single player the entire. And the game the environments are designed in a way that suits that. So like in Dark Souls, environmental deaths they're gonna happen. They're gonna happen more if somebody has invaded you and you're running for your life.
Yeah.
Try and get to a position where you can actually engage in combat. I don't really care about a lot of environmental deaths in other games without that PvP aspect, because I can probably take my time. I can probably strategize against the nearby enemies, take them out, and then it's just a convenient stroll up a cliff that's supposed to look, precarious, but I'm just holding a forward on my controller, so it's not a big deal. But in Dark Souls, I get that invasion notification. I have to walk up like a rampart that leads into the castle, and I'm just like, if they just stagger me with an arrow on here, I'll probably fall off and die. I don't like this.
If you've ever been invaded trying to make your way into the cathedral over the buttresses, that's rough going. Do you know, by the way, the story of where the Dark Souls multiplayer comes from? Of Miyazaki driving home one day, which hopefully gives you an idea of actually what the philosophy behind it was of a single-player game, which which is very much aided by that simple aspect of community to go along with it. So Miyazaki was driving home one night from work, and it was a really snowy day, big strong blizzard, and there were cars in front of him, behind him, and a car was going up a hill, and it just juddered to a halt, and it can't go anywhere. It's stuck on that hill, and the car behind it just inched forward and just shunted it slightly, gave it a little bump, just to push it. All of a sudden, that car's in motion, starts going, gets up the hill. The next car behind makes the bump and gets stopped. So the car behind that one now gives him a little shunt, boom, up the hill. And the line goes through and through, and eventually Miyazaki's there, and he bumps the car in front of him. His own car grinds to a halt. And then a few seconds later, he feels that shunt from the car behind him, pushing his car back into motion. And he gets to the top of the hill. And he thinks, I can't stop. I cannot stop to say thank you, because if I do, I'm not going to get moving again.
Yeah.
And that guy behind him, I can't stop to say thank you. Did he make it home? I don't know. And I don't know if the guy in front got home. But maybe if I could have thanked him, we'd have been friends. Maybe if we got out of the car to look at each other, maybe we'd have had a fight. We don't know what our interactions would ever have been.
Yeah. That is such like a wholesome story, like such a wonderful experience to be like, yeah, and that's why in Dark Souls you can join somebody and kill a giant monster together. Yeah. It's just that little bump to say like, yeah, you could probably handle this on your own. It might take you a bit longer, but I'll give you that little extra nudge that helps you get there quicker.
And I can tell you the amount of times I've dropped into someone's world. At one point, I was really good at fighting the two princes in Dark Souls 3. I just practiced them over and over. And I would drop into people's worlds and help them beat the two princes. And it was always the same thing. Prince would go down, finish a second phase, and there would just be, I would do a wave, and then walk off towards the big door, and then I'd disappear from their world, and I never knew what that person did then. Maybe they didn't go on and beat the Solar Cinder. Maybe they actually didn't keep playing. Maybe they did, and maybe they'd mastered the rest. I don't know. But I love that idea of the invisible community in that game, which I think is just was unique. I guess over the time we have very much replicated that in lots of different games, but it felt so unique.
If Miyazaki was in the United States, he would be trading insurance papers at that point. There wouldn't be no assistance here. That's it's a difference in philosophy. Completely.
No, I think In the U.S., you see people taking videos of cars sliding down hills, and they're making bets on how many other cars they'll bump into on the way down. Like it's a different community, which also exists in Dark Souls, I think.
The exact same incident happened in two different countries. Japan gave us Dark Souls, and you gave us marbles on stream.
Yep. You're welcome.
I would say that most games that are labors of love have the same thing. It might not always be on the same scale, but almost any game that's a labor of love where people have really been able to put their heart and soul into it, you get these cute little details and fun things that maybe don't need to be in the game, but we put them in because, why the fuck not? Because we can. And I think I mentioned that one of the main reasons that I loved Final Fantasy VII Rebirth so much was it always felt like the design team were just never told no. They might have been told, go back and make it better. I don't know. But it always felt like, okay, I've got X idea. Fuck it. Go and have fun. Go and do it, and we'll see what comes out on the other side. And then you have games like Skyrim, where there's where there's just lore smattered throughout the game. And actually, just on the note of gamified environments, it's something that's always been quite cute, of course. And I think it's addressed in Uncharted in a tongue-in-cheek way. It's when you go into an ancient tomb, for the first time, and you open the tomb and the door slides open and there's lit candles on the interior, and you think, what the fuck? I believe in Skyrim, isn't the lore that actually the Draugr are the ones maintaining those candles? And it's just a little detail that we've added into the world to make it feel a bit believable, because gamified experience, we need these candles to be lit, because I don't want to go in and deal with every single one. And honestly, in a game where the combat is so fun, I still think Skyrim's combat is better than we give it credit for. It's got a decent heft to it, especially for the kind of game it is. I don't want to drop my shield with my left hand, have to carry a torch. Or I don't want to have to forgo my big two-handed sword, and have a torch in the one hand and a little stabber in the other. Sword, that's the word. So if you give me...
pokey stick?
So if you give me all those candles in there, that's great. And I wouldn't have minded, actually. And as a gamer, I would have just thought, sod it, it's one of the rules of gaming. Yeah, it's lit. Good, thank goodness. But then they've actually cutely added in this little idea that, oh no, it's the ancient corpses. They're actually maintaining the candles. They're actually keeping the place lit. And it's just a way that a gamified environment is made to feel slightly less like a gamified environment than it actually is.
And then you get those silly claw doors where you have a key, but the symbols need to match up. And then you just spin circles to match the symbols on the key. Like, I have the key. I don't need a key that tells me how to open the door, and then I have to use the key. I have the key. Just let me use the key.
And of course, add to that as well that oftentimes the visual key to go alongside the actual key is on the wall in the same room, normally just up somewhere, which means actually the only person being stopped from entering this room is someone with a visual impairment. That's it. Everyone else can figure this out. It is bizarre and completely gamified. And I think it's kind of fun anyway.
Oh, yeah. I didn't have any problem with that when I was playing through it. But when you think about it from a realistic concept, because this is like, oh, it's this ancient tomb and they put all these traps in place. And now there's this complicated door lock and you need the key to open it. And you also need to solve this puzzle. The puzzle is look at the key. That's it.
It's the video game equivalent of writing your PIN number on the bank card.
Yeah.
It's that, which
It's a door that says password is password.
I've referred to it a couple times, but in Skyrim, there's the Lunar Forge. And I think that's great because there's some clues, obviously, that tell you it's the Lunar Forge. But it looks like any other forge in the entire game. There's not really a particularly hard set of mobs in front of it or around it. Just some of those, they're not barbarians. I forget what they're called, but maybe just bandits. But anyway, when you clear the area, and if you're there on, I think it's the full moon. I think it's only when it's the full moon. Not just at night, but on those particular nights, if you forge something, you create a lunar item. And it doesn't, my disappointment was that it's not a great weapon. It doesn't do much, but it is something that you can read about and see and find. So the narrative storytelling there, it's in the common world of Skyrim. It's in a common forge. Nothing really special, but when you do it, it's special. If you read the books, if you know the lore a little bit, that's the kind of stuff that was like, I did the homework.
But that's when you find, don't you, the special treats for the gamers who care that bit more. And it's a direct equivalent of people like Banana, who will play a game to genuine completion and will want to go and unlock all the trophies. So that platinum trophy or whatever it's called on Steam, that is their reward for it, which someone like me is never going to get because I'm not going to do it. Or if we go back and we play the old Final Fantasy games and we insist on running down every corridor and opening every treasure chest, there's a little extra reward just for us because we put that effort in. In this case, it's a slightly more abstract one. It's a reward for people who read the books. It's a reward for people who cared a bit more about the lore, who read about this game online and tried to understand a bit more about the world and the story. And they get almost no advantage in the game from having it. And if you don't know what it means exactly, you might just think, oh, Lunar Sword, okay, it's slightly better than the one I've got already, but it's worse than this weapon, so screw it. Yeah. But if you know the story and the world, then you actually get that moment of, oh, cool. And that's cool.
You just reminded me of another aspect of gamified environments that I'm actually not a big fan of, but it's those time-gated opportunities to navigate. So like you were talking about the Lunar Forge, and you can only forge these weapons when it's a full moon. And that one works for me. That makes a lot of sense. It's the Lunar Forge. It makes sense. But I'm thinking of, and like the biggest example for me was Final Fantasy VII in Wutai. There's a house that's just filled with cats. And when you first go into this house, there's a cat sitting at the base of the stairs, which means you can't go up those stairs. Because you can't step over cats. You can cast spells in that game. You can jump 40 feet into the air and slam down with your giant sword, but you can't step over a kitten. But shortly after, as you progress the story within Wutai, that cat moves out of the way and you can go up those stairs. And then I don't know if this is true. It's been a long time since I've ever taken this risk. But I think if you progress the story further, that cat moves back into the way and you can't get the materia that's up those stairs. Oh. And I hate shit like that in video games because I don't want to need to memorize what events have those time gates that close. I don't want to move past something and then never be able to go back to it. And that is something that's very gamified environment. This cat will only ever leave those stairs between these two events. And then you will play the game for 100 hours and the cat's just permanently at the bottom of those stairs. Not a fan of that.
That's actually where it ties in, isn't it, as well, to missable items in games, which is often a real source of frustration. And for me, I do find that generally a game with missable items will irritate me, unless it's very well explained as to why it's the case. So if an area, gets utterly destroyed by some world-ending meteor or whatever, okay, I get it, I can't go back. Right. But if just for whatever reason I just can't, or a cat is in the way, it will actually grind my gears or just irritate me a little bit, and it's completely avoidable. And mechanically, it's exactly the same thing, whether it's the cat or whether it's the meteor, it's exactly the same thing. But you have to sell this to me in a way that feels convincing, that feels like, oh, okay, I see actually why I can't go back there, why I can't do this. But also in that situation, if that's going to be the thing, don't put the missable item there, just put it somewhere else. Put it somewhere I can go back to.
Yeah, if that house was on fire and I ran in and I was evacuating cats and that's why I could not go back in there to get that item, I'd be okay with it. But the reason that I can't get the item is because there's a cat napping at the bottom of the stairs. I'm less on board with this.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I can blame God of War, the first one, for that issue, because God of War was built as a loving tribute to a lot of games that came before it, including the bugs. That's why Kratos can take an enemy and kill them up in the air with the chains. And that was a bug originally in other games. And so they used that same as a feature in God of War. But losing your loot, because they hid a lot of loot in that first game. And it was one of those where, oh, I can see there's another level here. I just need to figure out how to get up there some way, somehow. And it was like a puzzle game wrapped in a adventure action RPG, basically. And the newer games are the same thing. They took that same philosophy. It's like, it's this combat action game. Well, it is, but it's more of a puzzle game wrapped in those. And back with Zelda and Metroid and the NES and SNES games, so they always had like hidden areas, hidden things, but they weren't too tricky to find, and you would get a lot of clues and a lot of hints about things. With Metroid, you just basically turned yourself into a ball and bombed every single wall. I mean, it was just so much consistency. It was all over the place. But with God of War, the original one, when it came out, there were so many like little hidden areas that you're like, but once you got done with a chapter, you couldn't go back. You know, you either found it when you passed through that area or you did not. So,
you know what? I would probably find that I would really like it and think it was a great feature because, like all of my video game critiques, it's completely arbitrary. And whether or not I happen to like the game in question. Yeah. Like, so even in that situation, I might think it's great. But this is the same thing that goes back to our earliest channel law, which is just if you're going to do something in a game, do it well. And all of these guidelines and ideas that we come up with, and when I say things like I despise missable items in games, I generally do. But then there's how many exceptions to the rule? It's English grammar. You know, it's just, we have these foundations, but sometimes,
Yeah, I agree completely. And like I highlighted that thing in Final Fantasy VII, which is a frustration for me because I've played that game a lot and I've never actually figured out what the exact, triggers are for those events. I just know that like I do anything in Wutai and then I go check on the cats. And then I do another thing and I check on the cats. And it's like, this is such an unhealthy behavior. If I had just known what the trigger was, I wouldn't be wasting so much time.
Yeah.
And that's the part I have a problem with, is the like, I would love a direct connection between that missable item and what's happening. But when it's a cat moving, I have no idea what triggers that.
I feel that's what a lot of old RPGs in particular, in my mind, are quite famous for, is this idea of arbitrary things affecting arbitrary things elsewhere, and you're not really showing why. So the game logic switch that's existing behind the scenes and telling you, okay, which scene of the game are we on now? Which iteration of the game world are we on now? And there might be dozens, there might be hundreds of variables taking place, but there's this one grand thing. And maybe Switch 91 is telling us that the world is about to end. Switch 92 is after the world has ended. Switch 93 is after the world has ended. But that cat isn't in front of the stairs. How do I get onto that one?
Yeah.
And how do I stay there? And why was it that me taking down that poster for the turtle bar in Wutai in Cosmo Canyon, why did that cause the cat to move? It probably didn't. I'm just thinking of something that might have caused these obscure events to take place. And you just think, I can't piece together the logic behind what's causing what to happen here. I just know a lot of stuff is happening and a lot of stuff is changing, and I can't exactly pin down why. And for me, that's what, a lot of those old RPGs were really a part of in my mind, was just, I'll do something and not realize until X amount of hours later that I've actually done something completely else entirely. And unlike in a strong narrative game, it won't seem to have any relevance. I can understand if I accidentally caused that, what's the fucking blonde sorcerer in The Witcher?
Oh, the blonde one? That's Kara Metz.
I can understand if I accidentally get her impaled and put on a pyre. I can understand what I did and what caused that to happen. I can't understand why that fucking cat won't move.
Is this your criticism of games where you end up accidentally romancing somebody? Like, I did this thing and suddenly we were in a bed together. Like, I don't, those aren't connected. What the hell?
I just didn't know. I didn't expect it.
The thing that you did was meet somebody at the No-Tell Motel, and then it happened. So they are directly connected.
Because I thought we were doing like a conspiracy or something. So don't tell anyone about the Illuminati. I thought it was that. Yeah. Conspiracy. Wrap it up, Legion.
All right. Well, we will see you guys later. Thank you guys for coming today.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Am I a wizard?
Yeah. We appreciate your time going over this gamified environments. Are there any particular gamified environments that you would like us to have discussed or would prefer to talk about? Put it in the comments. We have a few extra videos that have been coming out independent of our podcast. Check those out. Banana's been making a Banana BG3 guide. My goodness. Very in-depth, very interesting, very beloved.
I don't know if it's any of those things.
If you like BG3, stay tuned. We'll probably have more content, especially not from Com. But
not a fucking chance.
We will check you guys later. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.